Okay, so in my first video, I talked about Stranger in a Strange Land in comparison to the having or being mode of love. And in this video, I'm going to be talking about having or being and its relation to jazz and jazz improvisation. And to start off, I think I need to clarify a misnomer about jazz improvisation, because a lot of people, like the classic misconception about jazz improvisation, is that the musicians just it just happens. There isn't a thought process to it, but that's not true at all. There's a lot of thought. There's a lot of theory, and so that's where it gets into having or being. So I think a having mode of jazz and jazz improvisation is having these licks, these set licks that go along with the chord changes, and knowing the music theory behind jazz improvisation, and being knowing solo transcriptions from the great jazz players, and being able to on the basis of like music theory analyze the solo. Like he goes to this chord tone, he alternates, he creates an alternate change to the one that's already there, and then resolves it. So there's a very mathematical and having mode of approaching jazz improvisation. And I think one of the great sax players of our time, at least on the surface, really represents that, and that's Chris Potter, because he has, when you listen to his solos, he has all this, has this amazing technique, and he uses basically these mathematical permutations. Basically, so like a scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and he'll take these numerical patterns and then translate them up or down in 3 half steps, or 3 whole notes. So whole steps. So there's that side of jazz improvisation where it's very very having. You have the licks, you have the jazz theory knowledge, you understand the chords, but then there's also the being mode, which is what you eventually want to get to. And I think John Coltrane's later work best embodies that in terms of specific albums, like A Love Supreme. A Love Supreme is probably the most popular one that you think of, or maybe some stuff off of My Favorite Things, Olé, Africa. And in that, it's less like the themes and the songs, like the songs weren't based off of like specific melodies and like specific chord progressions, but it was more so based on themes. And when John Coltrane would play the melodies or improvise, it was more about communicating emotions and the being mode of jazz improvisation, which is that expression of the self, instead of there's this chord and I'm going to play this lick over it because it fits. And so those are like the two best examples: the having, Chris Potter, and the being, John Coltrane. One is more about the theory and about the licks, and the other is more about the concept and the expression of self. Even though Chris Potter can do that, he can do both, but I think he's more so seen as the having mode. But then the final part is of this video is how jazz musicians use both the having and the being mode. And you can see this with a lot of jazz musicians, where you'll hear licks that they have repeated over and over again. So even the greats do this. And when anybody starts out, like I said, the greats, they learn licks, they listen to people, they try to copy them in terms of thinking how to approach the various chord progressions, or how to articulate and stuff like that. the having mode stuff, the bare bones meat and potatoes, which is the licks, and like I said previously, they get that foundation down, and then from there they expand into more being modes of jazz improvisation. Now that they have that basis, now that they've practiced all that stuff, they can slowly start to forget it and focus more, conceptually, focus more on the concepts that you want to, or the emotions that you want to put into your solo, instead of thinking in having mode where, like I said, you're going to play this lick at this point, and I'm going to go to the third, then create a tritone substitution, and then resolve it to the one. So basically, to summarize this, the having and being, in comparison to jazz improvisation, the having and being mode, they both have to be used. There are very few cases when it just starts, the being mode. I mean, that's like Miles Davis level, where you don't really need to learn licks, you just do it. So, yeah, that's jazz improvisation and how it relates to Erich Fromm's idea of having or being. Good night.